Welcome, Andrew Dole, to the Fit and Healthy Denver podcast. Andrew is the owner of Body Fuel Sports Performance Nutrition, a triathlete coach, a chef, former culinary instructor, the warlock of nutrition. What else am I leaving out?
You got it, man. To be PhD student starting here in August 1st. Yeah, you named it. I think the board certified specialist in sports dietetics is what separates me from the quote unquote nutritionist as far as what we do.
Let's get into that a little bit now that a shot's been fired. Why don't you tell us the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist? Because everybody sees nutritionists. I'm a nutritionist. I specialize in this nutrition, and then dietitians are just kind of lumped in with them. But really, there is a considerable difference.
Yeah, there is a huge difference. And it's not that nutritionists per se can't be good at what they do. A matter of fact, a lot of PhD researchers that I follow who do a great work in that area, who have doctorates in exercise phys and nutrition, they talk a lot about nutrition. But a nutritionist really is anyone. Like if you read a book, you're a nutritionist. If you read something like I just saw a post on the internet today about I read the China study diet and it changed my life. It's mind blowing and meat's a poison. Well, okay, so they read a book, now they're a nutritionist and they start giving out nutrition information in general. There's no education based on that. I mean, you don't just go to the person down the street to help you write a contract, and you certainly don't show up to your neighbor and ask him for medical advice unless of course they're a doctor. But everybody eats, so they all think they know stuff. And I think that's where we get a lot of this myth information. And I didn't say misinformation, I said myth information, is because it's all anecdotal. As a dietitian, we do go to a specific program in which a lot of people can. A lot of nutritionists have a bachelor's in nutrition. We go to a specific accredited program for dietetics for human nutrition. And then post that, we have to do a year's worth of clinical rotations. It's very similar to almost all other healthcare professions. And as a dietitian, we're considered a healthcare profession. We can take insurance. We work side by side in collaborative teams with other medical professionals. So we have a very specific role in nutrition. And then I've got a master's degree in human nutrition from K-State, or dietetics actually, where I did research on exercise associated muscle cramping. That was fun. Then I'm also a board certified specialist in sports dietetics, which is a subcategory of dietitians. So there's lots of subcategories for dietitians like Aspen. So we've got enteral, I don't want to get too complicated. Lots of different subcategories of dietetics who specialize in areas, weight management, eating disorders, those types of things.
Gotcha.
And before I could become a board certified specialist in sports dietetics, a CSSD, I had to be a dietitian for 5 years. I couldn't just go out and become one. And then I had to show documentation of so many thousands of hours of actually working within that group to even sit for the exam that I have to take, unfortunately, every 5 years. So it wasn't like a one and done, go take the test, give me CEUs. It's take this test every 5 years and show me you know what you know. So I think that's a big difference in who we are and what we do based on education, licensure, credibility.
Sure. And so you, with this sports dietetics being board certified, you've become a specialist of specialists for athletes.
Yes. And then within there, a lot of sports dietitians specialize within their own group. So for example, I don't work with team sports. I don't do football, soccer, baseball, basketball. That's not my jam. I specifically do endurance athletes, swimming, cycling, triathletes, ultra trail.
And you have your own team as well. So you run your team and right?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I did. So Body
Okay.
Fuel Multisport was a group of individuals, of clients and things that I had brought together and created a small Facebook group for that to keep everybody connected. I dropped off of triathlon last year to go do some ultra running and 50K, but I still keep that group intact and I still manage athletes, but I work with other coaching groups more so than mine now. I actually like the team dietitian for a few triathlon and endurance groups in the United States.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. And you're managing the diet for a lot of these athletes as well.
Yeah, putting together fueling strategies, just day in and day out. Like some of these athletes, this is what they do. Other ones are professionals who are really dialing it in pretty hard and view themselves as competitive amateurs. So what am I eating every day? How do I fuel for my work and then my sport, my meal timing? What macros should I be eating? Am I drinking enough water? What's my on bike, on ride during event strategies? What products am I using? How do I mix those appropriately so I don't get GI distress? A lot of athletes that come to me are trying to fix a specific problem with the inability to eat or drink enough during the day, and B, during events that really prevent them from performing as well as they could.
Yeah, and I know like I think I still am part of your Facebook page, and I was kind of just admiring from far, and I see how much your athletes were actually being on the podium, and it was super impressive. And it just goes to show you, I mean, everybody knows that nutrition is a big part, but your team, your small group of people were consistently, on the podium just over and over and over again. And I'm sure I don't want to discount your coaching, obviously, but it just goes to show like how all of that comes together, and when it's really put together and fine tuned, how it just elevates those athletes.
Yeah, a lot of the people that we saw towards the end of like last year were being coached by other coaches. So one of my things is a collaborative effort among coaches with healthcare practitioners to ensure their athletes are healthy and doing the right thing. Not any one person knows everything. And when we get into that situation, we find big problems. I was just listening to one of my favorite podcasts. The guy was interviewing a PhD, and that guy was a PhD in sports physiology. He was helping a Olympic level athlete who ended up getting amenorrhea, missing their cycle. We know that's a big thing, right? This guy's a doctorate. He is world renowned and very well respected for his knowledge base. But it was an individual who didn't know about nutrition. He was stepping over his boundary, or ignoring his boundaries, or thought he knew more than he did. And we find that with all levels of coaches. And there's a reason why the U.S. Olympic Center and professional teams, and even inside a healthcare facility, you have very specific professions that come together to collaborate, because each one knows something so in depth that you bring something to the table. It's when a single individual tries to encompass everything that people typically fall down,
Yeah,
which comes for a circle to what you were saying about the number of people who were performing and podiuming. They were doing that, being trained by other folks, when those coaches said, hey, you know what? Let's see what you can do with nutrition. It's not my specialty. And boom, you take someone who's really good coach, who can really tease out those physiological differences, with myself, who then takes all the time and effort into just nutrition. That comes together for the athlete, and it's like, ta-da, the light goes on and they start kicking ass.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be noted, you're quite the athlete yourself and have quite a accomplished career in triathlon. And I don't know about the ultra running, but I'm sure you kicked ass in that as well.
I don't know if I'd say I'm an accomplished athlete. I try to play the athlete, and last year's ultra season was the most fun I'd ever had. It revitalized my love for endurance sport, which I wasn't getting out of triathlon, to be really honest. And yeah, I had a great time. I got hurt. I loved it so much, as a matter of fact, and just started returning to running here a couple weeks ago, actually, after about 8 months.
Well, I don't know if you remember when I first met you, which is probably about 8 years ago now. You were just getting out of bodybuilding. And
Yeah,
so, you were this big dude, muscular. And at the time, you were like, hey, have you heard of this Tough Mudder thing? And I was like, not really. I don't know what it is. And you're like, well, I think I'm going to try it. It's like next month. So what do I need to do? And I was like, well, go run, I guess. I don't know. And then
yeah,
you ended up just like having a kick ass time. And, that was the one where I think they went straight up Beaver Creek Mountain. And, after
yeah.
that, they changed it. It was so hard. But I was super impressed with that. And then, you've kind of went from this super big muscular guy to this thin, I will say, not skinny, but this thin athletic, endurance machine. And it's a testament to you and your focus and dedication. But also, I'm sure, you have changed your nutrition throughout the years. And so why don't you just quickly kind of take us through that, and like what your nutrition was, what changed your focus, and then what it is now.
Yeah. So what changed my focus, and what my nutrition has changed a great deal over the years, man. So especially after I became a dietitian and then started really focusing on research and paying attention to what's coming out and some of the organizations that I work with. I'll tell you, let's work backwards. Right now, I'm a very plant-based eater. And by plant-based, my definition of plant-based is like 70 to 80% fruits, vegetables, and grains, nuts, and then, that 20% lean protein. Instead of where I was in the past, 8, 9 years ago, was really heavy meat eater. A lot of grains, a lot of starches, and vegetables were kind of like, yeah, I eat them, but it wasn't the big part of my day. That has definitely changed. I have recentered the plate. So one of the things that I am, that we didn't mention, is a certified executive chef through the ACF, right? So I started my career actually in nutrition as a chef. And so I've taught culinary for 10 years. And that culinary background, being a chef, like, I thought I knew food, and I did, kind of. And now I just recentered the plate, because the center of the plate for most Americans is like meat, man. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
what's the meat in the center. And that's been the mantra of chefs for a long time: center of the plate, center of the plate. And now I've just recentered it.
That's a interesting way of looking at it. And so I know there's a lot of different things we can talk about, and I think you have a lot of really interesting stuff going on your various social channels, and the amount of research you do into any question always blows me away. You literally have 10 answers that are very specific for any question, as well as the research to back it up. But let's kind of focus. So I want to kind of focus a little bit on basically thirst or hydration, because you really recently had a YouTube video that was really interesting, and it's about that common thought that you get hungry because your thirst mechanisms are weak, and so your body confuses it, and you get hungry and you overeat.
Yeah, which isn't true. You're not thirsty. You're actually hungry. And in my opinion, at the back end of that, it's, we don't know how to differentiate what type of hunger it truly is. Is it physical or is it emotional? Most of the time, in my opinion, at the moment, of course, I'm not doing any research on it, it's not my research topic, is that when we are hungry and we have an insatiable hunger that just can't be filled, right? That's not thirst. That's emotional hunger, that we're dealing with something, right? On the easy end, right? Just keep it super elemental on that way. The expert that I interviewed was an RD PhD researcher who did nothing but sensory and thirst and the physiology behind eating and satiety. And he's like, yeah, that's not linked. They're not physiologically linked. They're completely separate. I got a whole YouTube video and like an Instagram, post series about the fact that, hey, you're not thirsty, you're actually hungry. And that drinking water to get rid of that hunger or help with satiety or sense of fullness is very brief. The body actually adapts to that and will no longer work just because of the tonality of the stomach. And as a PT, you'll get this, like, the tone of the stomach being taut, the muscles around the outside are, nice and firm. And then as a flaccid stomach, something loose, think like a kind of an empty sack that's just hanging there, right? That's a loose stomach. And then as we fill it up with water, the stomach begins to get taut, but the body will adjust, and drinking water will no longer, solve that issue of emotional hunger. So I think it actually, there's a root problem there that we're trying to solve, that we're not. Like, hey, drink water, you're not really hungry. Well, no, how about we address why you're emotionally eating, and then we can see what the problem is.
So I'm guessing there's bits of psychology in that as well.
Yeah, there's tons of psychology in what we do as dietitians. And I think, this isn't about like, hey, what are dietitians specifically, but a lot of people think dietitians are like just food Nazis throwing out meal and eating plans. Like, here, eat this for 2 weeks. And that's the purview of other types of air quote practitioners, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even call them practitioners. That's not what we do. Like, the habits of who you are, the things that you do, the eater that you are, is a decades. I mean, depending on how old you are, you've cultivated those habits over a long period of time, and they don't just go away. And so changing your diet may brute force those changes, right? But let's say you follow keto or you follow paleo, like, you're brute force changing your habits intentionally. But once that structure goes away, you still fall back into the
Still
habits.
have the old problems.
Yeah. And so, kind of a long roundabout to, like, you're not really thirsty, you're hungry. Yeah, it's not physiologically linked. You're not thirsty. You'll know when you're thirsty.
What about with athletics, like, and hydration? How do you stay properly hydrated during a hot, sweaty athletic event? Let's say a run.
Yeah, there's a controversial topic right there, because a lot of the research, even for ultra runs, are looking at, do we drink to thirst right? Like when do I need it? Or do we
Hmm.
drink on a structure? And a lot of the research out there right now is like, well, you can just drink to thirst. You don't need structure. I tend to really disagree with that on a couple levels, right? First, when you get an entry level athlete coming into a sport, um, they don't have any real what's a good term? I don't want to be derogatory or condescending. They don't understand their body really well, right? Like they don't have these signaling systems and to know like, hey, I'm really thirsty. Hey, I should eat, or hey, what's going on? And correct. People who are innately athletic or have done sports for a very long period in their life, or who are even pros. Pros write about it all the time. Oh, I just drink whenever I want to. Yeah, because you got 20 years of
Done it
experience that you
10,000 times.
built.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the average person doesn't do that. I'm very big on structured plans that help you check that, or if this, then that type matrices, right? If this happens, here's what I think you should do. And that way, when you get into situations, you can make a decision on what you should do without, hey, I'm thirsty. Besides, like, look, a lot of people getting into sports are getting older. Thirst mechanism starts to lag and not function as well as we do get older. We know this. Thirst is a lag receptor or signaler. I'm sorry. Like once you're thirsty, it's
Too
too
late.
late.
Yeah.
And then we know with the gastric emptying rate of the stomach, you can't catch up. So once you're behind, you overload the GI system trying to catch up. You create a whole nother problem because the overloading literally stops the emptying rate of your stomach, which means nothing's going into the intestines, nothing's getting absorbed. You're right back where you were before you started drinking anything anyway, right? So I think structure, that's what I think, at least to start.
And so I know part of what you do as a dietitian and a sports dietitian is you really cater that to the individual. And I think most people, and myself included, before I talked to you, I thought nutrition was general. Good nutrition is good nutrition, right? But from what I've gathered from you is it is so individual. It can be, completely different for each individual. So for the average person who's listening and they just kind of want to know, okay, well, how do I figure out how much I want to drink? Is there some sort of rule of thumb to get them in the ballpark?
Yeah, it's a pretty easy test, man. You just go do a sweat volume test. I think that's the best way to go because hydration is very individualized. Nutrition for an individual is very specific to them. And I think one thing that I'm learning as I move into this PhD program that's starting here in August with Dr. Stacy Sims, and I listen to lots more PhDs talk about their topic, is to be very reluctant in providing these broad generalities,
Yeah.
like things that make it to the internet that people gravitate to, like everybody should do this. Well, that's not exactly the right. So there are some things that you can do, some diagnostics. And one of them is a sweat volume test. I have it actually on my website. People can go pull down the sheet. It's very simple. Jamie, you go to the bathroom, you have breakfast, you empty your bladder, you step on a scale, see how much you weigh. Then you decide to go out and do an activity for 60 to 90 minutes, preferably with no food or liquid, right? Because you don't want to measure it. Come back. If you're a girl, wring out your hair so it's not wet. Both male, female, take off their wet clothes from sweat, step on the scale again. And what you do is you look at the delta. Like how much did you weigh before you left? And what do you weigh now after, doing your activity? Gives us a really good indication of how much sweat volume that you're losing out of your body in a period of time. And then from there, you can start to work backwards in devising a hydration strategy, a fueling strategy.
Sure.
It has to be paired with food.
Yeah, that's really simple. That's cool. I like that.
Very simple.
So you just figure out how much you lose per hour essentially and try to stay ahead of it. Huh.
Well, no, you can't stay ahead, man. So I'm glad that you said that, right? So we can never really stay ahead. We can't be ISO. We're always going to be a tad bit behind
Okay.
unless we're doing something really slow. Like hiking, you could probably stay ahead. And you never want to be hyper, right? You never want to be ahead. Very rare will you be even. We're trying to minimize the gap or the deficit from being behind, however.
Okay. What is the downside of getting ahead? Slowing yourself down?
Oh no, getting too much volume, hyperhydrated. It's way too much volume in the body. You start to dilute. If you're drinking plain water, which is a shit hydrator, plain water is not the best go-to for long events.
Hmm.
You start to get pooling of the water. You get edema and swelling in the ankles, things like that. You start to dilute your electrolytes and your sodium reserves. Hyperhydration puts too much stress and strain on the cardiovascular system because now you're full of this liquid that we didn't need. So it's hyperhydration is bad. It's just as bad as being dehydrated or hypohydrated. Dehydration will hurt you, and so will drinking too much. There's a nice balance there.
All right. Yeah, that I didn't know that. And so, what is the best hydrator then? Is if you're losing a lot of sweat and in a hot race.
The best hydrator is an electrolyte solution with a tiny bit of sugar mixed into water. So the electrolytes and the sugar act as co-transporters. So the reason why I said that, water is a poor hydrator is that it lacks the necessary mechanisms or co-transporters to actually get it into the cell. Right? There's a reason why when we rehydrate in the hospital, you're not getting bags of water, right? It's like saline solution or ringers. There's all of these things. And so water is best used, when we're active with a little bit of carbohydrate and some electrolytes to help actually get that water into those interstitial spaces, into the cells where it can be used. Just pounding down tons of water really quickly, one, it doesn't get absorbed where it needs to be, and it's not helpful. It can, again, slow down the gastric emptying rate of your stomach, which is not good. So it's a mixture, and it depends on what you're doing. So this is that broad range. Are you going out for 90 minutes? You going out for 8 hours, 17 hours? You're going to be gone for, 2 to 3 days in a stage race. So there are different products that work really good for different things. And just like anything else, you don't use a hammer to do everything, right?
Right. And so the question I asked you before we started recording, because I didn't want to sound dumb, the osmolality.
Osmolality, yeah.
Yeah, and so can you tell us a little bit about that and how certain products may not mix well in the gut when running?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best way to understand osmolality is to think about when somebody's tried to mix Kool-Aid or a drink mix into water and it just simply doesn't dissolve, right? It's just there and it's all this particulate. So that visual particulate is all of the stuff taking up space inside the water. Now imagine just dumping a whole bunch of mix, like lemonade mix. The more you put in there, the less likely it is to get dissolved and mixed up. And so let's think about this just heavy water. Heavy water is actually a thing, so I probably shouldn't use that. Let's just talk about water that has a ton of stuff in it, right? And in this case, it's a ton of salt, a ton of sugar, a ton of electrolytes. It's all taking up a weight. When we drink that, the body has to dilute it somehow. It's not absorbed, it's not appropriately diluted. So when we drink, let's say juice, if you were out running and you're drinking juice or a soda, there's a ton of sugar in there. That sugar has a high osmolality rate. In order for the body to successfully use that, it has to be diluted appropriately. So you can chase it with water to help dilute it. And if you don't, and you're out there drinking, really 4 or 5 scoops of Gatorade, or you're drinking a soda and you're wondering why your gut's all messed up, it's because the body, hygroscopic with a G, not hydroscopic, but hygroscopic. So sugar is water loving. When it gets into the gut, it's going to dilute it somehow. The body's going to make it a source it can use. So it starts to pull liquid, the water from the tissues into the gut to dilute this really sugary or high osmolality substance. Well, when we think about liquid in the gut, what comes to mind is diarrhea, because that's exactly what it is. So hence the gut rot and the diarrhea thing that occurs when people are out drinking these really sugary, high osmolality drinks, which is why sports drinks that are out there are specifically formulated to be put into a certain amount of water. They're easy on the gut. They have a good osmolality. They digest well. They empty into the intestines appropriately. They've got the good co-transporters. And some of them offer, extra sugar, so you have fuel built in, and others don't. And it's just purely electrolytes. So to circle back to your original question, why do things not mix well together? It's because most people will go out and eat, let's say, a bonk breaker or a power bar, and then they're sipping on Gatorade. Well, that Gatorade is mixed into liquid. That liquid sets the osmolality or the proper dilution. Now, if we add a power bar onto that, we've increased. That's like taking the power bar and throwing it into the Gatorade and shaking it up, right? In the bottle, which is gross. Well, that's what you just did in your gut. There wasn't enough plain water to dilute that food
All the
substance.
sugar and yeah.
Yeah, so people are drinking sodas and juice or Gatorade or Scratch or EFS or Fluid or Tailwind or insert whatever product you have that has a sugar load to it, plus electrolytes, and then you're eating solid food. Yeah, that's kind of a recipe for disaster because now body has to dilute it from somewhere, and you're not giving it plain water.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also good to know. And sometimes could this just be like, would this ever happen with like energy chews or some of like the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like you're
like
drinking
shot
Gatorade and
blast
then you
or
take some
chews or stuff.
Gatorade energy chews as well.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
Okay.
Like so every 100 calories or so, probably every 20 to 25 grams of carbohydrate, depending on how you want to look at that block of food, needs to be diluted with water. 6 to 10 ounces. And if you think about that, like people are taking 3 or 6 blocks or really solid food, power bars, water
Hmm.
bars. And I'm not saying any of those products are bad. I'm just saying that they
That's what it
need
does.
plain water to
Yeah.
be diluted. And if you're chasing it with Gatorade, and again, not throwing Gatorade under the bus, insert any
Yeah.
sugary sports drink there, and you're messing it up.
All right. Okay.
Especially over time, Jamie. Like you can kind of get away with anything for 60 minutes, right? Or
Yeah.
90 minutes. You might feel like, whatever, I feel kind of yucky, but I'm done. It's the long endurance events that really get you where all of a sudden the GI is overwhelmed over time after time after time of doing this, which is again what I do as a sports dietitian is help athletes train their GI systems with appropriate products to accept the maximum amount of water and fluid they possibly can to improve their outcomes.
All right. Well, Andrew, I know you've got several different social channels and they kind of have different little focuses. Why don't you kind of tell us where some people can find you and what is on each of those channels?
So YouTube is my long form. As a chef, obviously I do cooking videos, right? I do fun things, quick hacks, things that I learned over the years to make things fun. I also do long form topics like probiotics for GI issues. You're not thirsty, you're really hungry. Alcohol and metabolism are a couple that I do. Plant evidence for plant-based performance diets, where I kind of talk about all different aspects of sport, endurance sport, lab work, blood work, what to look for, vitamin D, vegan athletes, red S, female triad. So YouTube's a good place to catch the long stuff. And that's the Endurance Chef on YouTube. You can type in Body Fuel or Andrew Dole. You'll find me. My picture, my ugly mug is up there on all of them. And Instagram, Instagram's Andrew D Chef RD. That's a great place to find sort of like little snippets of what I'm up to. And hey, I think that's interesting. Let me go to YouTube and check it out. Kind of like the small commercial. I use Instagram for commercials, right? Hey, this is cool. This is what's happening. And then I'm on Facebook. That's just the me, where I post a little bit of everything and just kind of be a human.
Yeah, and I'd encourage anybody to check them out. I think especially the cooking videos, are really, I'm like, huh, I never knew I could do that. It's like, and I remember you telling me about this years ago, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do these quick little videos, like how to properly cut garlic. And I was like, is anybody gonna watch that? And you're like, I think some people will. And then when I saw you were talking about it, I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'm gonna do that from now on. And then the
Yeah,
one where you're just like skinning a salmon in like 20 seconds, and I was like, oh, I didn't know how to do that.
with your
So,
bare hand, or how to do ginger with a spoon, or
yeah. I
fun
think
stuff.
they're, yeah, I think anybody who sees that is going to do exactly what I did. Like, I didn't know you could do that. I'm going to do that from now on. And I think some of your other stuff, I find fascinating. The deep dive into all the dietitian stuff that you're doing is mind blowing. And, you've always kind of just really impressed me and blown my mind with anything that has to do with diet or nutrition or how that incorporates into athletes. And I know, so your PhD work, which is getting ready to come up very soon, you will be traveling to New Zealand, living there for 2 to 3 years, and you're going to be focusing on plant-based diets and athletes.
Yeah, I had a moonshot of an opportunity to work with Dr. Stacy Sims, which that was, I don't even know where to go with that, man. Like, not only am I a fanboy of all the work she does, because a lot of, I would say 80% to 90% of my practice are female athletes, right? So I do follow her work a lot. So that's huge for me. Like I'm like super excited. It's not just New Zealand, it's Stacey Sims, right? Like who gets to go work with that? Like I do. That's awesome. Yeah. So the goal here is my proposal, or at least the topic idea, is to really understand if there is a difference between plant-based, right? And I mean plant-based meaning high plants with some meat, and then the subcategories like vegetarian or veganism, and whether or not there are different markers in these in ultra endurance athletes. And I think the ultra endurance athlete is just a good proxy for a lot of athletes, but their training levels are so high that we would see like this inflammation, these inflammatory markers. That's very similar to what high profile professional athletes would do, like a chronic lifetime of training, and what that does, if anything, to inflammatory markers in the body. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the lit review and putting together a proposal, and I want to see if that is one of the mechanisms that is beneficial to plant-based. Now, I'm not vegan or vegetarian myself. I am incredibly plant-based, right? Like 80% plants, and then the other 20% I do believe in dairy and lean protein for my own reasons. But what is it behind these plant-based diets that all these pros are coming out going, I'm vegan and now I'm better, I'm faster, I can train more, train harder? Like, what is that? There's a lot of different things it could potentially be. I need to investigate one of them.
So after this, you will literally be one of the best known experts on plant-based diets and athletes in the world. Let's call it what it is.
I hope to be, because it fits in with my ideas that I'm a chef. Like, nothing against the exercise physiologist guys who are doing amazing work. But one of the things I found, and you may want to cut this out, is when I got out of K-State after doing my research there on exercise associated muscle cramping, I was doing it specifically for my profession as dietitians, so that we would stop perpetuating like things that aren't necessarily true. Like, it's not sodium per se that's causing cramping. I think we should look at other interventions like glycogen levels and nutrition and diet. What can we do to change these? And as a chef, I get to bring those together, because exercise phys guys and kinesiologists, like, they don't have that. They don't put those numbers to a plate. The actionable component, that's what I hope to do. Really just take my RD as a food professional, as a chef, and go do some research and say, this is what we should be doing. And then go, do my thing with cyclists and triathletes over the world and make them bigger, faster, stronger, and last longer, because we're eating the right stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. I'm excited to see how this goes for you. And to clarify for everybody, Andrew is still going to be seeing clients in Denver. He is a local guy. And so he's still going to be taking clients, because I guess New Zealand still has the internet, and I guess you can still do your job educating and advising people. So still a Denver guy. And how can people get a hold of you, Andrew? If anybody's interested in how they can tweak their diet to improve their athletics or sport, how can they get a hold of you? How can they find your website?
Yeah, you can Google Body Fuel SPN. Sam Paul Nancy stands for Sports Performance Nutrition. My website will come up. The website is actually bodyfuelspn.com. All my contact information is right there. And you're right, I will continue to practice. I closed my office here in Castle Rock in April, preparing for the move that was supposed to happen last week, and it didn't. Turns out that my practice has grown a great deal with telehealth, because telehealth and nutrition just go hand in hand. People can literally from their phone do a Zoom call with me while they're driving, talk about nutrition, get things in place, and then go about
You've
their
done
life.
that for a long period of time as well, right? This isn't something
Yeah.
you've done this for years.
Yeah, I've done it for a long time, but when you're sweating it out in the office and you got to break time back and forth and you're screwing around with insurance, it takes away from a lot of time. So I don't do that. And when I move, I'm keeping that aspect alive. I'll be practicing managing my athletes. They thought I could still do all over the world.
All right. Well, if you are interested in tweaking your diet to make yourself the best athlete possible, give Andrew an email or contact him through his website. And I wish you the best of luck. Andrew, thank you for coming on the podcast today and giving us all of your wealth of knowledge. And, I hope to have you back on the podcast sometime soon, and we'll talk about another topic that you can impress everybody with.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye.